just turned it off. We're going to open the meeting. This is the November 21st School Board Operations Committee meeting. We're going to start with, I'm not sure who's making this presentation, the enrollment campaign update. Ah, that's Joe, coming out from behind the glass doors.
Hi, everyone. Joe Strake, Board Liaison in the Chief Executive Officer's office. So my purpose here today is to provide an update on the summer enrollment campaign, as well as to provide an update on our Enrollment Taskforce, which was just recently launched. On July 25th, in public session, Special Assistant to the Chief of Staff, J.D. Merrill, made a presentation kind of updating on the summer door knocking campaign, so this is going to serve as an update to that. It worked. It seems like it's always difficult for this clicker. All right. So the first map is a percent change enrollment from 2010 of some other LEAs. As you can see, Baltimore City is on a downward trajectory. So we are in the process of kind of thinking about how we could get students to come to our great schools and be exposed to our great teachers. So that's kind of behind all this work that we're doing. So as you saw in the previous slide, our enrollment has gone down. And that's kind of in line with other LEAs in Maryland, but we're seeing it at a much larger rate. So one of the biggest factors of enrollment decline has been students going to other public schools within the state of Maryland. We also see students going to private schools. Another challenge is the declining population of the city of Baltimore, because where there's less population, there's less students. And, combating the negative perception that is perpetually being put forth by the media. I'm not going to point any fingers to any local TV channels. So the initial implementation plan that we have to kind of focus on this enrollment campaign starts with Dr. Sanalisis's visionary blueprint for excellence. As I mentioned, we did the summer door knocking campaign in conjunction with the American Federation of Teachers, the Baltimore Teachers Union, and the Mayor's Office. And then, as I said, we're starting this enrollment task force. So yep.
I think Michelle has a question.
Sure.
Hi, good morning, Joe.
Hi.
How are you today?
Good.
No, I for some reason I felt that the summer door knocking was slightly successful. It was successful, wasn't it? And I was wondering if we, since it was only the first time we've done that, can we do that again? Have the door knocking, maybe have one in the spring and maybe one during the summer? Is that possible? Or do we have the personnel to do something like that?
So I think we're definitely going to look at it. I think one of the things we're presenting on today is the data, and the data is mixed. I mean,
I read the data, and it looked like it did go up, but well, not go up, but it did look like from the report that was given before. We heard this report before, and it looked like we did get a few. Then it could increase if we continue, not make it a one-time thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges that some of the increases are in district transfers, so a significant portion of them. So we just have to think about that, and some of them were new to the district, but I think we have to continue to think about the return on investment if some of them are just transferring students from other schools.
Right, and I thought it was a good, positive relationship that we had with the union. It seemed to develop some, something good that came out of it with the union and the school system.
Yeah, okay. So I think that's right. I think we really felt like it builds goodwill in the communities, and I think the union staff really did an excellent job of really being really positive and upbeat in the community. So I think those parts were good. I just think we need to continue to drill down on the data to make sure we understand what the impacts were and whether it's worth the return on investment is worth it.
Okay, thank you.
And also, I want to thank you for your suggestion, because at this point, all suggestions are open. So we'll determine what's feasible and what's not feasible, but we're open to any suggestions from commissioners, from the public, as far as what we could do to get the word out of our great schools.
I just, given that you just answered that way, I just want to, for anybody watching this or listening to this, just give a little bit of a shout out to Joe here. This is exactly the attitude, and he's not the only one, but this is the attitude we want. Like, tough problem, we're open to ideas, bring it on. And I think that's the kind of where we have to be on this. So, Joe, I really appreciate that you bring that, like, no matter what you're doing, you bring that. It's great.
I follow your lead.
Yeah, well,
All right. So the next slide is this is the overview on the B3 campaign. So there were 25 target schools and neighborhoods. Though that was done with a 5-point strategy. So one, we looked at schools that historically have trouble filling their pre-K slots. The second one is we looked at areas of the city where populations in the neighborhood of surrounding schools has gone up, but the growth in the schools did not follow accordingly. We also looked at areas where the neighborhoods of schools were quite diverse, but the student population of those schools did not reflect that. We also looked at 21st century, our beautiful 21st century school zones. And we also looked at school zones that have persistent high dropout rates. And as was mentioned earlier, we had 40 fantastic teachers and paraprofessionals to serve as advocates on behalf of the district to make this happen. And I just brought some examples of some door hanging, which is bilingual, Spanish and English, some postcards. So there were some good materials that were created for this program. So as Commissioner Bondima referenced earlier, here's some of the data that we went back and looked at. So the first column is the school, the second one is the projected enrollment, the third is the actual enrollment, so then in the fourth you'll see the difference in numbers and then the percent differences. So as you can see here, Fort Worthington seems like a huge winner with a 35.6% increase. So these are our top enrollment adjusted schools out of the 25 targeted school zones. But as you'll see in the upcoming slides, this data is a little challenging because of various factors.
It does point out, though, and I'm looking at our 21st century team now, we need to do a whole lot of things to make sure those schools succeed given the level of investment. And so while we're looking at the data, it's no small thing that we exceeded expectations. I think a lot of people can share in some of the credit, but we have to succeed at that level with the 21st century schools. Like, we have to. So it's not the only thing that we need to do, getting kids in those buildings is a good start. So.
Absolutely, and after this presentation, we'll be bringing forward the drawings for Govans and Medfield, which are two fantastic buildings. So I'm assuming that enrollment will shoot up in those schools too when they're completed.
Just assume it.
That's a good point.
Got to make it happen. So you can't just assume it.
They're door knocking as well.
Right. So, I think it's an all hands on deck kind of situation, but we have to have the right leaders. It all has to be all hands on deck. 'Cause
Absolutely.
we cannot afford to let those fail.
So you're knocking on doors already? You're doing it now?
Good morning. Nicole Price, 21st Century. Yes, we, for Fort Worthington in particular, we did a series of things. So we were aware when BTU held their canvassing in the Fort Worthington area, shortly after they finished their canvass, we sent letters to families that lived in the Fort Worthington zone but were not currently attending, inviting them to an open house, a tour of the site, and a meet and greet with the principal. We followed that up with live phone calls to those families to invite them to the same things, to tours, to open house, to the barbecue. We went out, and then from there, we door knocked those targeted families. So we had identified a little over 300 families that lived in the zone, but were not currently attending, either because their students were originally in middle school when the school was open as a pre-K to 5, or they just generally lived in the zone and were attending another school. And so part of that, we documented who we called, who we contacted, the particular school that we targeted, and how many students actually came from that school to Fort Worthington.
Oh, so you've done more than what I was talking about. I'm
Yes.
glad you did. So,
We have a recruitment plan for Pimlico as they're planning to move back in September 2013, and a recruitment plan for Dorothea Heights as they move back. They will move back in January, but our recruitment plan is targeted for September 2018.
thank you.
The asterisk in that slide? You've got, there's a few,
On Fort Worthington,
On
James
Fort Worth-
McHenry and.
So later on in the presentation, I'll get to why those are the schools that the enrollments went up tremendously, but other factors were identified in addition to the door knocking campaign as to why those numbers were so high.
just in general on a presentation, when you have an asterisk, there should be some, anyway, it's cool, keep going,
Gotcha.
we're good.
So this next slide shows that in general, our September 30th enrollment numbers showed that city schools as a whole dropped 1% of enrollment, whereas our 25 targeted B3 schools went up 2.8%. However, as I mentioned, there is a bit of a caveat to that, which I will get to, which is, so the 3 schools that were asterisked are here. I don't know if asterisk is an actual word, but I'll proceed. So Fort Worthington, as we mentioned, is a 21st century school, brand new building, so that drew in a large amount of interest in the community. So as we'll see in subsequent slides, we saw a lot of internal movement towards Fort Worthington. So the enrollment numbers are up tremendously, but that doesn't mean that they're all new to the district. We saw a lot of students move from other schools to Fort Worthington. James McHenry and Mary E. Rodman are 2 turnaround schools, so they have new dynamic leaders, and they have new programs at those schools, and their new principals did their own door-knocking campaigns, and they did their own local recruitment. So that also yielded a lot of results that we can't necessarily take credit for.
Real quick, I'm gonna make this quick. The new principals that you have at these schools, are they new to being a principal? And if,
No, they had transitioned from other schools
oh,
within the
okay,
district.
so-
So once we removed those 3 schools that were in the previous slide, our B3 target schools saw an overall drop in enrollment of 0.1%. So the decline was lower than overall in city schools, but this number tells a much different story than the previous slide, which included those 3 high enrollment schools. So this next slide goes a little bit more into the data of our new enrollments at the B3 target schools. So that first number is the new students in the district. So pre-K, kindergarten students, we saw a gain of 1,123 students. Overall, new to city schools, 436. And then this next number is the one that I had previously mentioned, which is in-district transfers. So we saw the largest number was students that came from other schools within the district. So those 3 numbers combined leads to our total enrollment numbers. And below, you'll see the percentages of that breakdown.
436 is nothing is no small number, though. I mean.
Oh, that's right.
We do have to unpack it a little bit more, but that's a good number.
And it was definitely a success, but we just wanted to give you all the terms of the success in this presentation.
I think it's important, but I think that we want to, a lot of energy went into it. You still need to understand the return on investment, but I think Michelle's original point, Commissioner Bondima, I'm sorry, the fact that the 436, we want to flag that and just say,
Yeah. So,
proactive, we want to make sure that the narrative is accurate, but part of this narrative is we're on it. Like, we're not being passive about this, and I think
right.
that's part of what, and the unions
right.
are a part of this, the city's a part, we're all a part of it, that's the narrative we need.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think 436 is good. I think partly what we have to unpack too is there anything we can do to mitigate the impact on surrounding schools? Because some surrounding schools did have big impacts in terms of their enrollment. And so, again, some of that translates with the 21st century impact as well. So, I think we just want to think through, is there anything differently we can do to think about that?
So on this next slide, you'll see the breakdown of those numbers by the biggest gainers of the B3 targeted schools. The one number I do want to show is Fort Worthington, 359 in-district transfers, so that's the overwhelming bulk of their new students. However, I do want to caveat that Samuel F.B. Morse, which was closed, a lot of those students make up that 359.
Question.
Yes.
Slide 11, do you have on the bottom row, if you don't have it, don't worry about it, but the percentages for the district-wide for those three columns, just to see how the 25 schools compare to the district-wide averages?
I can get you that information. So actually, here is exactly what you were looking for. So this is the, yeah. I was like, I feel like we added that, but here it is. Good segue, actually. Yeah. So here's the information that Commissioner Frank asked for. So you see the changes between the B3 targeted schools and all schools in the district. So once again, you can see that the numbers are close between them, but. All right, so lessons learned. As Commissioner Bondima said, we're definitely thinking about doing this again based on the success, but we definitely want to be more cognizant of the data that we're collecting. So we're looking at some qualitative things, such as asking people, if you're enrolling, what was your main choice of enrolling, so we could really categorize that, so it could inform our future decisions regarding enrollment marketing. So currently we launched the Enrollment Taskforce about a week ago. It's made up of nonprofits, business partners, faith leaders, government entities, school board members, city school staff. So basically, as many people, as many different voices as we could get to kind of all take ownership of growing the population of our students in Baltimore City. So we're definitely engaging different stakeholders to draw on their personal expertise. A lot of investigation, research, and questions are being asked as part of this. And the next convening of this work group will be in early February. Task force, rather. So the task force oversees 3 different work groups, all of which are staffed by experts in their related fields. So we have a public relations marketing work group, an enrollment and retention. This is already outdated because we're constantly evolving. An enrollment and retention strategies work group and a customer service work group. So here's the timeline. We're in the process of work groups starting to convene. They're going to be presenting their initial findings to the Enrollment Task Force in early February. The work groups will then have more targeted questions and look for February and March. They'll make their final recommendations to the task force in early April, and then a separate work group will convene in approximately the middle of April to provide final recommendations, which will be made public as far as what this 6-month period of work yielded. And that's
Sort
all
of an
I have.
interesting, the energy in the room for that first task force meeting, and Andy and Allison, along with Joe, were both there. It was like really good energy. I think people were a little astounded that we were actually giving them the data. And then when they asked questions after the meeting for more data, Joe says, okay. And he gives more data. And I just ran into somebody from Under Armour at another meeting, and they said their person that was there was so excited. And she said, are you really going to give the data that they asked for? I'm like, yeah, really. She said, really? I was like, yeah, really. So I think it's just people understanding that we really are legitimately asking for help, and that we care what other people think. And there's still a little bit of like, really? But it was good.
Real quick, could you add to your list of recruiting or enrollment, farmers market on Sunday morning or Saturday? It would be great if you could set up a stand, because it is packed down there and people will stop by. In addition to that, many of our local colleges and universities are where our citizens go, and they have, you'll know that they have many children in Baltimore City Public School wait till a snow day. And we have to almost shut down the classrooms because their children are out of school or whatever. And if you have a workshop and contact the president or student affairs, that you're going to have a workshop, or not workshop, with something there, and then you can talk to all the students coming through the student affairs, you will capture a big audience because they always have questions. So if you could add that to and Mondawmin, put a stand at Mondawmin, everyone, I don't know if we have the personnel to do that, but it would really help. And I think that you'll get a lot, your enrollment might increase a little bit.
And thank you for the suggestion. As I said, all suggestions are on the table until they're taken off the table, so we'll definitely bring that to the work group when they first convene.
Thank you. So next up, we have our 21st Century team. We're going to have 2 feasibility study presentations, Medfield Heights and Govans. Yeah, I actually read it all last time. I was like, wow.
Okay, well, we'll get started so that we make best use of your time. Thank you for seeing us today. Mignana Anthony, Nicole Price, and Maureen Gersberg, who are here to talk to you about the enhanced approval packages for Govans and for Medfield Heights schools. I'm going to give a brief introduction, but most of this will go through Maureen and Nicole. So the special situation about both of these schools is that they were both put into a different priority for the 21st Century program. Which one is this? Okay, we're going to start with Medfield, all right. They were both higher in the priority, and their programs were held after we reprioritized the schools last spring. And so there was a significant amount of community engagement with them because both of the communities were very disappointed that they did not move forward in the EAP approval process, which would have been held really last spring, and that they've been delayed. And so Nicole will talk a little bit more about what we've done to work with them and where the push is on both of the schools. Medfield Heights is a school that currently is around 44,000 square feet. The requirement for their enrollment and for the design capacity is around 80,000 square feet. So it's going to be a significant add to their current facility.
Mignon, I do want to ask a question. So you mentioned that shift in timeline. Is it also like the one that came to the board last week where you're doing design build versus construction management? Because I didn't see any language about that.
No.
So this on
Fairmont
that.
Hartford is the only building that we're doing that with.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because
okay.
you made a special point about it, because that, part of that rationale was, well, there was all kinds of rationale there, but part of it was timeline related.
Right.
Okay.
No, this one we're just going to move as quickly as we can, but it will take the typical construction manager at risk format, with the construction manager pre-construction team being starting at the same time as the architect. The design architect will come on board and take these feasibility studies and move along the typical path. Excuse me. A key area for Medfield Heights was that the community there really was extremely demanding about trying to stay on the site during construction. We had an architect who, well, you'll see in the conclusion that they actually did not make a strong recommendation for any of the options, which was very disappointing to us. But it's a matter of trying to balance all of the needs and requirements for, all of the demands of the project. This project, we will hope to complete it by fall 2020, and I think we can move through the project and talk about what we've accomplished in terms of the recommendation that we've made, which is option 4.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Gersberg. I'm a senior ed planner.
I'm sorry, option 3, replacement option 3. She always keeps me honest. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna walk through the existing site first, and I'm sorry that, the pointer doesn't really show up on the TV screen, so we'll try and work out something different for next time. If you look up there, you'll see the existing site. The main building is that L-shaped, dark gray piece. The piece that it's kind of eating is a modular from like 1970, and then the playground is that light gray square at the bottom. It's a one-story building, and they actually don't even have a gym right now. It's a cafeteria, auditorium, gym, multi-purpose space that they have. All right, so this is the existing floor plan. We won't go into detail with that. All right, and this is the proposed plan. So the first level, you have your younger kids in the purple, the PK and K kids to the left, and this is going to be our academic wing. You'll see as we go through the floors along that top area. That main entrance is the yellow, right off of, I can't read that. But, so the main entrance is that yellow area, and then you have your big boxes kind of south of that, the orange. Wood Heights is that northern road there, and your main entrance would be off of there. You have your cooperative use spaces, so your gym and your dining, et cetera, right there on that first floor. If we continue up, okay, we can zoom in, which is nice. So again, you get that main entrance, which is the yellow area, your younger kids in the purple, the pre-K and K, and your big boxes. And this is a 3-section school, so the final SRC is going to be 491. And we wouldn't go lower than a 3-section. That's our starting point.
Good question,
Yep.
Commissioner Hassan?
Just really quickly, is there no off-street parking for staff and faculty?
All right, so part of the proposal is the small area you see here. There's a lot of street parking, however, that is something that was raised during the community meetings. Nicole, is there anything you want to add to that, or just? Yeah,
So
So-
just basically no?
just the minimal, yeah, and that's mostly visitor.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we-
Yes. Yep. And, sorry, let me also back up for a second. Let's look at the site plan. If you notice, there's this huge grade drop-off, which kind of pushes the actual building portion all the way to the right. So just keep that in mind as we go through this, because that is one of the limiting factors. And, okay. All right, so that was the first floor. Second floor, again, you see this kind of academic wing at the top. The blue is going to be your second and third grade, no, sorry, first and second grade. And the collaborative learning spaces are those white spaces in between. So again, it starts to follow that pod structure that we've been pushing for our collaborative learning spaces in our 21st century schools. And then off to your right, you will have your science and tech room and art rooms. This is that top floor. This is going to be grades, third, fourth, and fifth. And again, you see those white collaborative spaces interspersed throughout.
I'm curious, and I tried to read as much of the material as I could to understand this, but that's an enormous school garden. Does that exist? Or is this like we're going to have it exist? I mean, there was a lot of stormwater management. The full feasibility study, I can't remember which document it was in, had some really great stuff about possibility of a green roof and stormwater management option. It was terrific. And that I loved. But then when I saw this school garden, I just wondered, does that already exist?
I don't think the garden currently exists.
But somebody must want it enough to have it appear on all the renderings.
We have gardens included in a lot of our proposals, just typically. One thing to keep in mind then is because of that huge grade, that black line you see off to the left, that is a very large retaining wall. And I think that's something that's definitely going to be developed more in design. So I don't know that necessarily there would be that perfect plateau there for a school garden, but this is just the initial feasibility proposal.
Yeah, no, I didn't look before I came to see if this was one of the green schools or if they have a green team, but typically if they do, then that's something they frequently do. And it's enormous.
Great opportunity for one, and also part of a recruitment strategy as well.
Yeah, I mean, because those kind of things are great for the neighborhoods, because that's one of the questions that always comes up. It was just at Hamilton in their outdoor learning space and garden, and what happens to this in the summer? And the answer is frequently, well, we have a collaboration with the community and people use it for gardening and all that. So,
One of our problems, I think, right, is going to be this issue of recruiting to the school, because I think that, what I understand, the size that we're gonna build it to, that the projections don't necessarily support it up to 86%.
right.
So we're gonna have to do a lot of work while they're in the swing space.
Commissioner Bondima?
Hi, I was just trying to figure it out so you can help me here. Is it possible that you wouldn't have a school garden outside, but put the school garden, you have any space on the rooftop to have
You know, the whole
Greenhouse.
rooftop thing it's been an issue. We're going to really study it again once we get the design architect to look. We're looking again at solar and rooftop compatibility, and maintaining it is always the issue.
Well, if you get a chance, run over to BCCC. They've had the greenhouse for as long as the school has been there, and that's where we used to, I'm not even there anymore. That's where we used it for our classes, and it works very well. They have visitors, so it might be a good idea to stop over to see how they're doing this. And it's not even on the rooftop, it's on the third floor, but we're in an area that's accessible to going outside the room.
We'll make a note of that, and I've asked Joanna, she'll be doing a presentation for you all as Joanna Pisonier on the update on the on sustainability programs, to work a little more closely with us on the year 2 schools to, reincorporate some of the areas like that
Because
we
it
had
seems to
sort
me-
of wanted to do before but didn't
Right.
because of
Seems
cost.
to me you got the parking and am I looking at that right? Limited parking space. You might be able to use some of that for parking? For parking space?
Which part are you talking about?
Excuse me?
Which part are you?
Where the school garden.
Oh, around back?
Yeah.
Saying if you put their garden on the roof, you free up some of that
Or in a
space.
third, how many floors do they have? 2,
3.
3? Yeah. It might be, but just look at it, it might work. Because if you only have limited space for the staff, faculty, and staff, you might be able to use some of that garden space for parking.
When we get in full design, I'll ask that we
Just
put
look
those
at it
notes
anyway.
down. When we get in the full design, we'll make sure we look at those things.
Thank you.
So here we just have some potential elevations, but again, this is just kind of preliminary and it's based purely off of kind of what the proposed floor plans were that you saw. That's a really good section. You get to understand how much of a grade drop that is there. And then that taller piece on the left, on the upper section, that would be your main entrance. And obviously how that actually looks would be developed in design. Here's a 3D view looking at it. And again, that at the top one, that where you see that piece protruding out, that would be the intended main entrance. And then to the right is all that academic bar that we discussed. And on the bottom, you have the other view. The flat one? Those would be your big boxes, so your gym and your dining. On the second floor. Okay.
I think she's with the
Oh,
lower-
yeah,
the
that's
protrudes.
probably gym or dining. We make those are our taller spaces. We can look it up. Hold on.
To be the only person advocating for green space. This is like, go for it.
Yeah.
Nicole, could you
That's
talk-
the gym.
Nicole, could you talk about the community a little bit?
Sure. So
Yeah, this is
If can I-
curious to me.
Yep.
How they ended up with this
I'm gonna go back, well, I don't have to go backward so far. You can see, Medfield currently sits on Buchanan, and behind they have all of that green space. So very early on, from the very first meeting we had with, stakeholders from Medfield, their primary, goal was to keep students and staff on site, and felt like the, space behind the building was the perfect location to build a brand-new school while staff and students remained on site doing construction, and then once the new building was complete, kindly move over into the new building, with the old building then being demolished and made into some sort of green play outdoor baseball field. for numerous reasons that either Maureen or Mayon can go into with regards to building on the green space, some site constraints, conversations about existing sinkholes, having to remediate, putting a lot of resources into the actual field, not having that contiguous green space long-term, so having partial green space, a school, and then more green space. There were some concerns from some community members with regards to breaking up the green space, especially long-term, so once the building is done, you still could get to keep your green space. So probably until the time we place Medfield on hold, the community was strongly, particularly parents, I wouldn't say the community, parents were strongly advocating to stay on site. There were concerns, as noted in the feasibility study, with not just relocation, but to where they were relocating. Since then, we've had ongoing conversations with them from January of last year up until last month, just to get them more comfortable. It is, the relocation is Chinquapin building, which is a little over 3 miles away from where they currently are. Of course, yellow bus transportation will be provided, but as you know, if any of you are parents, I can imagine the anxiety of putting my little one, particularly at kindergarten, on a yellow bus for the first time to send them 3 miles away. So we have been continuously working with the parents and talking with family, with PTA, to make sure that we are constantly communicating with parents to dispel rumors, get them comfortable. So the PTA has agreed that they will take a list of somewhere between 10 to 20 parents, so that they're constantly calling them to make sure that school maintains whole as they move to the swing space. We are working on arranging a tour of the Chinquapin building. We've done everything to look at potential bus stop locations, looking at the area around Chinquapin to get the community get parents more comfortable with it. Some parents who actually live near Chinquapin, but students attend Medfield, have drafted letters to, or are drafting letters to other parents to let them know about the community so that they feel more welcome. And I would say that year-long process, so in this case, them being on hold has helped to calm some of the anxiety with relocation. We obviously can't say at this time how many parents will stay with the school as they relocate. We do know that oftentimes we experience a decline in enrollment during relocation. That's not true in every case. For example, Lyndhurst only lost 15 students when they relocated. Dorothy I. Height, formerly Johnny Howard, didn't lose any students, partially because of the shift with Westside. So we are working with the school through the PTA to make sure that we maintain enrollment as much as possible, that parents are comfortable with it, and really using parents to talk to other parents instead of our office. I'm hoping that developing what we call now the Truth Squads, that's the PTA members. I would say one of the rumors that came up is that we were going to relocate students to Poly. So just having people who can dispel those rumors as soon as they come up is really, really, really important, particularly in this case when so many parents are comfortable because the kids are moving. Most of the swing spaces are probably 2 miles away. This one's a little over 3 miles, so there's a further distance.
So you must, can I assume that the combination of the site issues on the existing green space and the desire to keep that green space intact is strong enough to make you want to go through this transition? Because we know from the other schools that you've already gone through that these transitions with this swing space is hard. So you must really have strong reservations about doing that construction on the nearby green space to want to go through this again.
From the feasibility study, we have strong reservations that it's going to work. I think the tension between...
Wait, say that again? You have strong
We have
reservations?
strong reservations that it would work to place the new school on the big, large green space.
Which is probably why you're...
Because of infrastructure that's there.
Okay.
But I mean, this issue of whether the school district should be weighing cost against the safety and the turmoil of moving kids is an issue that comes up with almost every school. We sort of get pinged on, are you moving the kids because it's not going to be, because it's going to cost less for you to do it this way, is the question. And that's why we're recommending the option 3, quite frankly, because it has enough funding authority in it to cover whatever we need to do. But we are going to instruct the design architect to relook at the existing green space to do the full evaluation and see if there still is a possibility of building the new school on the green space and keeping the kids there. You know, it's a slippery slope because we don't want to promise something that's not going to happen, but at the same time, we do feel there's an obligation to do exactly what you're suggesting, and that is make sure we've exhausted all evaluation of that full green space, which we can't do until we get into design, full design. The feasibility study just gives us indications, doesn't, you know, and estimates. Once we get the designers in there doing the geotechnical study, evaluating every single aspect of what's underneath of that ground and seeing how much it's going to cost with the construction manager involved, and they can come up with options, then we can, you know, guarantee exactly which way the design is going. So
I mean,
that
it
will
is
be part of their
less. I
scope.
mean, it is less, but it's not dramatic.
Not
I mean,
dramatically.
I don't want to be a person who says, oh, it's only $1 million.
Yeah, yeah.
But relative to these kinds of numbers, in some of the other buildings where we've seen the different options have had as much as $3, $4, $5 million swings, we're talking.
But they're in different categories, though. Look at the categories that they're in. They're,
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I don't feel like we're as open to
that negative
that
scrutiny.
critique. Yeah, I get it that it's a different category, but this is 28 versus 28.6 versus 29.1. I mean, it's, anyway, it just doesn't, it passes the eyeball test in terms of like,
Yes.
it's hard to say that you're doing that. That's all I'm saying. Not that somebody won't.
So we're recommending the harder of the two, and we're going to see if we can still accommodate, you know, the more preferred and keeping the children intact as we go into design. That's really the short story on that one.
Does the community feel, did you get some sort of positive response to trying to keep what looks like fabulous contiguous green space together with fields? And, I mean, is that a community amenity that's?
They're very split on that because of who's managing that. You know, there's a lot of people who want very much to keep that green space and the field and how it's managed and who's using it and all of that intact. You want to say something?
I would think about what terms we're actually using. So we always say community engagement, community feedback. And one of the things that we did certainly in year 2 was when we collect feedback, we have people indicate if they're a parent, staff, or community member, no students. So if you're talking about community residents who live nearby Medfield, their preference would be to keep the green space intact, contiguous, not interrupt the ball fields, not have a school located between 2 baseball fields. So that would be your community, non-parents. If you're asking about feedback from parents only, it was actually of Medfield, although we had good meetings with good attendance, we didn't get a lot of feedback on the building per se. The driving feedback was keep on site, right? So we didn't get comments on the building. We didn't get comments about where the community space is located or where elementary school kids are located or any of those things that we get at other locations. It was keep students on site. Oh, by the way, it does have natural lighting.
Here's an enrollment task force strategy thing. How do we get more parents, how do we get more families from Medfield Heights to want to send their kids to that school?
One of the things about this,
Right? I mean, because if there's that kind of a split, if the
Maureen
people,
can actually chime in, but I think this school actually captures a large number of students from the zone. So unlike Fort Worthington, where there were 1,000 students or close to 1,000 students living in the zone, but only 400 attending, we don't have as robust a number of students to recruit from in the zone because they do capture a high number of the students from the zone.
so they already capture a lot of people in the
Correct.
zone. So then is it, I'm going to stop after I ask this question because I feel like I'm going into, like, I could do a thesis on this. Like, I'm sitting here wondering who's using the field. If you're already capturing a large number of people, is this one of those areas of the city that has one of these, really popular baseball leagues, and so people are coming from all over the place? That's
Yep.
what I thought.
Yes.
Those are different from the people who are sending their kids to the schools. So there's something about, that is not only the school system's responsibility and certainly not the 21st century teams, but there's something bigger going on here about who participates in the rec leagues and who gets those opportunities and how do we build some bridges there. I don't want to go too deep into it now because, again, it's not your responsibility, but this is not the only neighborhood in this city where this is a phenomenon. Because the kids in those schools should also be part of those leagues. I mean, it's a complex, I'm sure there's some racial racial dynamics at play here too. I'm not sure, I should spend some time over there, but This is a complicated thing and not one that the 21st Century team can easily solve.
Yes, you're correct.
Yes, absolutely correct.
So my initial question was around the idea of our need to increase engagement. And it's especially specific to this site because of the need for increased enrollment to fill the larger space. But are there any thoughts right now about specific academic sort of lures or enticement places? And if so, are there any architectural features about the feasibility study that are specific to supporting that?
Well, Dawn Shirey isn't here today, but she is absolutely going to be delving into that issue as we move into design and making sure that the architect that picks us up is going to dovetail. I've been making a really big deal during the year two schools that the architects have to provide options that actually integrate with the academics that we're trying to show in the school. I mean, the physical manifestation of the school should also be a learning tool. And so I've been challenging them on each project to work with our academic specialists to do that. So we're definitely going to have that going on. And sure, hopefully it'll be a great tool for recruitment.
So at this point, to the best of your knowledge, you don't know if Dawn has identified if this
Not
should
yet.
be dual language or some of our higher interest.
She doesn't start until about a year before the school is actually open, so she's still working, excuse me, sorry about that. She's still working with the year one schools, the ones that are preparing to open in January and September. And then the year
Shocking.
before, then the year before they open, then she jumps in.
She's only one person, really?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
I do want to stress that while I think even the administrator was really hesitant about relocation, her leadership in this lately has been amazing. And I would say similar to what Dr. Barnes did at Lyndhurst to keep her school together, to continue to talk to parents about the transition, what she's going to do once they get there, how the school will stay the same, the importance of everybody coming together. That makes a huge difference when you're transitioning, when you're hearing from your school leader, your staff, that no, our kids are going to be treated the same way they were. Our kids are going to have this. They're going to have the same thing. The school is going to be whole. The school is going to remain. That's a huge part in making parents feel comfortable. It's one thing for me to come and say, here's what 21st Century is going to do, but when you have the school staff working with us, and now the PTA, it makes a big difference for the transition of students.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks for taking the time to go a little bit deeper with this, because this feels like a complicated one. Well, you're not last this time for a change.
Okay.
I think you had a typo on your, one of your documents for Govans still had Medfield Heights written on it. I'll find it while you tee up the presentation, and I'll find it.
Okay, thanks. So Medfield Heights is also a replacement recommendation. It will grow by a third. It is a conversion charter school, and it represents one of the schools where we've had the most successful engagement process during the feasibility study of any of the other schools, which was a reason why their team and community was so disappointed that they were going to be not getting completed until January 2021. So we can go through that, Maureen, and talk about the aspects of Govans.
I found it. So just for the record, I think you just want to, it's the document that's labeled, 2017.11.12, 213, Govans Part 3.pdf. It's the 5,018 kilobytes on, with the yellow cover.
Yep, the part 3. What page?
Let's see, what page? Got the school district offices involved. Then you've got the Baltimore City school community involvement, and it says principal and staff of Medfield Heights. Community.
Thank you.
It's just, it doesn't,
Yes.
that's the only place, so just so that
Thank
you
you very
don't have
much.
to, the public doesn't see this version. Or they did, but I.
We'll fix it. Thank
Yes.
you.
Sure.
All right, yes, that is my document.
Don't need to sign.
All right, so
I get so-
Govans, let's talk about Govans. As Mignon opened. They are a conversion charter school. They are a pre-K to 5, and they also have this citywide Pride program there as well. Because they anticipated growth, we made this school, we added in extra flex classrooms as part of the design, and also you'll see some of the collaboration areas, they're designed in a way that should in the future they grow so much they could potentially turn those collaboration spaces into classrooms should they need to. But again, right now we're aiming for an SRC of about 590. All right, let's talk about the site to begin with. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer really. So the site, as you can see, is very awkwardly shaped. It's got this little peninsula that just kind of sticks out to York Road, and then Advanced Auto Parts on the north side of it. Their address is on York Road. However, as you can see, there are a couple of neighborhood streets that come up close to the site. This is, do we have the existing at all? No, okay, all right, we don't have the existing in there, so we won't talk about that too much. It's an open space plan in the front with an older portion in the back. They used to have 2 portables on site. One was recently demoed. They still have one attached to the existing building. For the proposed plan, you can see the main entry is right between that orange and pink box. So your community space is that orange, the admin is the pink. And then if you continue towards the back, you have your younger kids. If you kind of loop around to the bottom, you get your cafeteria and your gym, and then play areas in the center and a little bit off of the, in the upper right-hand corner. One thing to note is a lot of our kids walking to the school are coming from that lower right-hand corner. So one of the things we chose to emphasize with this scheme was that there was going to be a path connecting up to the front, and that we would work with screening any service drives or dumpsters, et cetera. And I think that's something that's going to definitely get designed, looked at closely during design, particularly just how that service drive would work in conjunction with our students walking.
That's the little yellow arrow in the southeast corner there, and you know, really talking about how do trucks come, how do deliveries come, and not come across where the children predominantly walk to school.
All right, so that's the main floor. If we continue, oh, and also the staff parking spaces you'll see along the back. I believe that was requested specifically from the community to kind of create a buffer between the school and the houses that are immediately adjacent to the site. Okay. Here's the second floor plan. Can I actually steal that? It's really hard to read that type. All right, on the second floor, in the upper right-hand corner, you have your first and second graders. That light gray box next to the blue on the top, that's one of those flex classrooms I mentioned. And then that lower light blue box along the top, that's a collaborative learning area. And again, the school requested that we have some collaborative learning areas that could potentially turn into classrooms years down the road if it turns out their population grows that much. In the upper left-hand corner, you have the media center, so it's directly over your admin from the floor below, which is ideal. We like to have a clear circulation path for those spaces that are going to potentially be used after hours. There's the third grade just below that media center, and then that light blue is a collaborative learning area. If we continue to the top floor, here we go. Sorry. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, those are 2 flex classrooms in the upper right-hand corner. Below that is 4th grade. Flip back up, there's some slightly lighter blue classrooms. Those are that Pride program I mentioned. And so those are their classrooms and support space. And then along the other side, the dark blue, that's your 5th grade classrooms and another flex classroom, with the supporting collaborative learning area right outside of it.
So I want to mention something here, just a very short footnote, and that is that one of the areas with the new administration at the IAC has right now, they've been really questioning us a lot about collaborative learning areas. The executive director doesn't really see the benefit of them, so we've had to explain them to them over and over again, show them exactly how they're being used in the new schools that have opened, and this has come up, so it's just, I just wanted to make it a note for you, because it's been coming up more frequently lately, and as this school moves to IAC approval, it may come up again.
From Commissioner Frank?
Are they flexible open spaces or flexible spaces? Are they without walls? and-
Flexible and collaborative spaces in general.
Does that mean they're open? Like, They're not-
Yeah,
they're
they're
not
open,
contained?
yeah. And depending upon how they can be designed, they can be semi-open or semi-closed, depending upon what the academics are.
and
for
where
that.
does that idea come from in terms of?
For collaborative space, you want to talk about it, Maureen?
Sure. So one of the three main points of 21st century was community, flexibility, and what am I forgetting? Collaboration, obviously. So collaboration space, basically, it allows like different classes to come together in one point and maybe like do a pullout for a specific lesson. And again, it gets kids not just necessarily kind of sequestered in their classrooms all the time. It gets more interactive thinking, and it allows for, again, just different activities or approaches to learning throughout the day, and adds to the flexibility of each teacher, because they do have that space as a resource.
Are there enough classrooms for every student, even though there are these flexible?
Oh, yeah.
benefits?
So actually, one of the things you might have seen in the justification, they have a federal grant to increase enrollment. So that's something that they are going to be doing on their own already. So between SY 15-16 and SY 16-17, they grew by 40 students. Yay, we were really happy about that. But then this year's unofficial IC numbers were showing them actually pretty much the exact same as last year. So right now, as we said, we've included several flex classrooms, and we even have these collaboration spaces for the future. But right now, their projections aren't showing them meeting that 86% utilization. So when we get into design, we'll have the official SY 17-18 enrollment numbers, as well as updated projections. And we'll be able to kind of see then just how many flex classrooms might be needed. So that's where we are with that.
Thank you.
Just on the
Questions?
enrollment
Oh.
staying stable, they did not do as heavy a recruitment for this school year, because they don't actually have the space to expand. So for example, last school year, they started using the media center as their science classroom. And where we used to have our meetings in the media center, now we're having them in a small, tiny parent room. In the media center, the last couple meetings were standing room only, so they don't really have the space to grow, so they haven't been, they've asked for an extension on the grant, because if they go out and do recruitment, they don't have any place to actually take kids in.
Commissioner Hassan?
Has there been any conversation, this might be a nice partnership place with the city, about doing a pedestrian bridge over York Road? Or some secure transport way that kids could more, York Road is, it's the Grand Canyon.
It's terrifying.
In that neighborhood of who can live on either side, who can get to the other side.
We could note in our design notes and bring that up with the Office of Planning. That'd be an excellent, like you say, partnership thing to bring up with them as they help us go through UDARP and go through planning reviews during design. I like that
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, and one of the, like even with Baybrook, we're meeting with Inspire and DOT to kind of see where we can make it safer in terms of the access points to the site, and that York Road absolutely is the zone actually straddles it, so yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You want to say something about Govans community?
Sure. I'll just add, I'll just add quickly, as Mignon said, this was one of the more engaged communities. I'll give you one example where it really came in handy to have that robust engagement early on, actually maybe two. Govans sits on, as Maureen said, a irregular shape site, and residents on Hale were really concerned because we were building a 3-story building that it was now going to block the sunlight. That came up really early because of the door knocking, because of the letters from our office, because of the phone calls. So people were actually there for the meeting to give feedback on the feasibility study at 50% versus once we were further down the road. And so it was able to be addressed at the 95% meeting. It was one of the few meetings where residents said, oh, I can see where my feedback from the 50% is actually in the 95%. The core team and our office worked in collaboration, so they would do a lot of door knocking, they would share the addresses with us, we would send a piece of mail, and then a robocall. And so I think it's really that layered communication, similar to the Fort Worthington recruitment strategy, that layered communication that really helps with the number of folks who turn out and feel invested in the process.
Just one last piece, and it's the piece I drop on all of them about this one, the last one. As we go to architect stage, really encouraging to have a space to have a washer and a dryer and a shower, just to ensure that kids have the equity opportunity to have.
That's
That's
included.
It is in there?
All of them.
It's included in all the schools.
Okay, thank you.
So I just, one thing to note for, in looking at this, well, I question first. Was there any concern about relocation, transition here? I mean, What's their swing space?
They're relocating to the Chinquapin building with
They're going there.
Medfield, but it is a lot closer to Govans
So they
than
don't-
it is to Medfield.
okay, so they're not going to.
Those two principals used to be in the same network, so they are familiar with each other. They've started talking, so I think it'll be the co-location is not the concern. They're not concerned with transition. In fact, if you ask them, they're probably ready to move out of their building tomorrow.
Okay, I mean, there's something here, Allison, I mean, I know we're doing the first year with Principal Mark Martin and the 3 other schools. There's something about the possibilities of, not just for turnaround schools, but these sort of regional collaboration among schools, how we can take advantage, I mean, just this little story right here about the principals working together and thinking together about transition and combining space, and, I don't know, it's sort of something that, you know, as we think about replication, if that model works, not just adding more schools to Mark Martin, but what's the possibilities of clustering schools to work together, learn together, share, there may be some economies of scale, do outreach together. I don't know. I don't have a conclusion to that thought. It's just, this is a completely different story than what we just heard in the other one about people wanting to stay in their space. And the deeper we dug, there's a lot of dynamics at play. But this is a whole other set of dynamics where people felt engaged early, they could collaborate with the other principal. Oh yeah, relocating's not such a big deal. That's like not the typical story we've heard.
I think relocation is really becomes an issue, but because of distance.
Yeah.
And so for Medfield, I think it's really the distance, not the relocation itself. So for Govans, it's a mile maybe, or a shy of a mile that they're going to Chinquapin, so they're much closer to the building. And just on collaboration, one of the things that we're looking at for year 2 schools, particularly those schools that are closing or co-locating, is how they use their Title I parent involvement funds to come up with a joint plan to engage parents at both schools. So if one school's gonna do a literacy night, maybe it's a literacy night for parents from both of those school communities, and then the other do the math night for the schools. So we are
That's
looking
good.
at.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. The more we can get some economies of scale from and turn positives from like what can be chaos, that's great.
Then following
new
along
buildings, the new buildings are fantastic. The principal from Medfield, one of the things I think that helped change her is she follows me on Facebook. And it's kind of funny to me. She said, Nicole, I miss you. And I'm like, you know, I'm from 21st Century. She said, yeah, I've been watching you on Facebook. I see the new buildings. I'm ready. I am ready for the move. I get the sacrifice, but our kids deserve this.
Good for
But
you.
along the line with what you were saying about collaboration, Baybrook has, become newly very uncomfortable with the fact that they're going to have to move. And Nicole offered to set up a network of information from the other principals with the principals already done and that group so that they can get lessons learned and understand that it's not the end of the world. And also to help them understand, what we try to do to support them and the children, the families in the move. So that's exactly what you're saying is very helpful.
And I
Fantastic.
think related to your comment is I think we're learning a lot from this team in terms of how to do co-locations and then mergers well. So, I mean, Northwestern Forest Park was a good example of a merger that there was lots of reasons to be worried that it was not going to go well, and it actually went really, really well. And I think that's a testament to this team's work. And then we're were talking about using or learning from that for things like, now we're talking about, relocating in the portfolio recommendations this year, Bluford Drew to the Harlem Park building to co-locate with Augusta Fells. So how can, those schools aren't merging, but they're going to be co-located, and so those same kind of synergies and benefits that we saw when the Northwestern students and the Forest Park students realized when they came together that suddenly, when you have more kids to build a team, our sports teams are better. Like, there are benefits to being together that that co-located schools can benefit from. So how do we learn from that and then apply those kind of lessons learned to a situation like BDJ and
Yeah, and having principals get out in
Augusta
front
Fells?
of it and feel like they're part of what's driving that. We
That's
saw a
right.
couple of examples in presentations in other settings about principals kind of saying, I got a buddy in another school who's a principal, and we're both having some enrollment challenges. What if we propose to merge rather than waiting for the hammer to come down
That's right.
from some other place? The more we can support that kind of work up with principals, because we know we have to, right-size the district in terms of outmoded facilities and all that, but the more we can put principals in charge, and obviously parents and communities, but the better
That's
off
right.
we'll be.
I think that's right.
So, nice job, really nice job. Next up, we have a budget update. I think we might be okay. This is pretty quick. The budget update? Didn't look very substantive to me.
Good morning. Courtney Desabay, Special Assistant to the Chief Financial Officer. I'll be presenting this month's budget update on behalf of Interim Chief John Walker. All right. So the first part is about our FY18 budget process. As we know, and we presented last month, the process wraps up with the enrollment adjustments. So the enrollment adjustments took place this month. We had final allocations sent to schools based on their 9/30 enrollment, and they adjusted their budgets accordingly. So we had 10 schools come in for the collaborative sessions. So these are the mandatory sessions that we did for the schools which had the biggest decrease based on a percentage of their general fund allocation. So they came in and they were supported by central office staff from the various offices in order to help them balance their budgets. A number of these schools needed additional support, which was provided by the CFO office as well. In addition to the 10 schools, we had 17 schools who signed up voluntarily for office hours. It was the same sort of support provided for those schools as well. After this, we had the Office of Human Capital hosted a transfer fair to facilitate the mutual consent to transfer staff from schools that were under-enrolled to over-enrolled, et cetera. So the process is still ongoing. As of last Monday, we had 85% of the schools balanced. As of this morning, we still had a few outstanding schools, issues that are lingering, whether they are technical issues or just process issues to finish balancing off the remainder of the schools. But we're just over 90%. Any questions on the enrollment adjustments?
Couple quick ones.
Sure.
One, with the transfer fair, about how many staff were involved?
That I'm not certain, but I could find out from Human Capital.
Okay, good to know. And then there's been some conversation in the community about an issue with adjustment with ELs and students with special needs and budget allocations specifically to charter schools around that happened in the alignment with the October 1 counts. Can you explain more so the community's really clear on what happened with that?
Yes, I can explain part of that. So the traditional schools received an additional allocation for EL and EL weight with the enrollment adjustments, and this was not the case with the charter schools. This weight was distributed. It wasn't a terribly large weight, but like I said, was distributed only to traditional schools, which I think was the basis of the conversation. And this was part of the adjustment or makeup for some of the Title I issues.
So my question with that is, as I understand it, was about $175 per person.
Correct.
That was allocated. But if it wasn't allocated to charters, and we have schools like Wall Street Academy that are almost 100% EL learners, that's a huge impact to a school like that.
Correct.
Um,
And that is something that's ongoing, but I'm not too certain where the conversation is with that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the enrollment adjustments? All right. So next thing we have up is the FY19 budget process. The beginning of the FY19 budget process is the development of the funding model. As we know, we've been engaging community principals and the board on the development of the new funding model for FY19. So just on here, we have a calendar of the engagement so far. The main thing that you'll see updated is that there's a fourth engagement added for January. We had 2 sessions last week, one on Wednesday the 15th at Frederick Douglass and one on Thursday the 16th at Poly. They were fairly well attended compared to the previous ones in October. Both meetings, we probably had somewhere in the region of 20 to 25 community members attend. We were also graced with the presence of a few board members at some of the meetings as well. So the interaction was very good. The feedback was very good. We wanted to make sure that the community felt that they had the opportunity to provide information and feedback, and that feedback was being incorporated. Our partner ERS has been doing a great job of incorporating the information they've received from all the meetings, the board meetings, the principal meetings, and the community meetings into the recommendations that are being made. And one of those recommendations was to add an additional session, which will be taking place in January. Currently, we're looking at what the impact of that session is in terms of our budget calendar and how that affects our delivery of the budget. The first part of our budget development is the finalizing of the model, how we're going to allocate funds. So if we are able to push that step back to January, that's going to affect the timeline for the rest of the budget development as well.
So on that, I appreciate that you did that. I wasn't able to attend the October 25th sessions, but I attended the Douglas session on the 15th. Very lively, fabulous ideas.
Very engaging.
You were there?
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah. And I don't know. I felt like every idea was worth taking. I mean, it was good. So, and I heard the same thing was true about the other one. So obviously you can't take every single suggestion, but I was impressed by the presentation from the consultants and the role that the staff played in making that presentation. So
Yeah.
not easy.
No,
People,
not at all.
as a result of going through those conversations, people get a sense that how difficult it actually is.
Yeah, I think that was one of the overwhelming takeaways, is that people have gained a better understanding of the give and take in the process and the compromises that have to be made to make certain things priorities. Everything that you add kind of takes away from something else or vice versa. So trying to figure out how we can weigh those things, I think, was the most important takeaway.
Commissioner Hassan?
And this isn't directed towards this presentation, but just to make sure that we get out there, the Enrollment Committee might really want to look at the impact of the post-Labor Day start, because that really is giving us a much shorter window of time to collect, capture, re-engage, bring kids in, make sure everybody knows heads and tails of where they're supposed to be. So it's a chance to highlight it, so thanks for the space.
All right, thank you. So as I mentioned, there'll be a 4th session added in January. The date on that is still being determined. Would help if I remember to switch the slides up here. All right, so our last section is upcoming milestones. So right now, as you well know, we're in the process of finalizing our 930 enrollment. This is not so much the close of the FY18 process as the start of the FY19 process. These are the numbers that we'll be using to project what our revenue will be for FY19. So we're going through the cleansing process and finalization process for that, and then going into the projection process as well. Our next update, December 19th, will be here again at Ops Committee. Any questions?
No, we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Final item is our procurement. I have just a couple of questions. So I think we'd like to do this the way we've done the last couple, is just go to the items where there's a question. Good, okay, so, yeah, I think, my first question is probably going to be maybe another opportunity to educate me, because I think it's something I just don't understand. When I'm looking at the Maryland Education Enterprise Consortium, when we increased it in August by $300,000, then, I mean, the power failure at North Avenue, we sort of got that. So now it's really not very long since August, and we're getting a second increase. And so I just wondered, so because in the explanation, it looked like a lot of vendors are involved in getting this money. Part of my question was going to be if the scale of the contract would have been known in the beginning, would different people have gotten the contracts, or is this just kind of an umbrella vendor for a lot of different contractors? It just seems like a huge increase after we already had an increase. So can you just explain what's going on here?
Yes.
I'm sorry to not have a more intelligent way of
No
asking that
worries.
question.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Parker, Director of Procurement. What's going on here is that the Maryland, the University of Maryland does a solicitation on behalf of it's a consortium of schools. And so we all participate in it. And we're members of the Maryland Education Consortium. And so when the university does this solicitation, they make multiple awards. And they break those awards down into hardware, and then they also have another contract for IT services. So this contract is specific for hardware and related devices. And so they make multiple awards. In this case, they probably made 10 to 12 awards based on all of the requirements of all the schools in the state of Maryland. So our amount is fairly small in terms of your question about would there be more vendors? The vendors were already predetermined through the initial solicitation. And all we do as a university or as a school system is come to the board and say, we want to use this contract. Our estimated amount that we're going to purchase on this contract was initially $350,000. But for numerous reasons, one good reason being that we had the emergency power failure, we had to purchase a lot of equipment on a fairly quick basis. And so that's why
That was the 300.
that was,
That was the 300. The power failure amount was for the 300.
right. And so now we have additional requirements coming forward that have been identified by IT, and Ken can probably speak better to that.
That would be helpful because it would seem that these IT requirements must not have been known on either August 22nd or June 14th. This is this is like a doubling, just this increase is almost a doubling of the original contract. And the first one that was related to the power failure, this one just looks like it's related to the purchase of new equipment, which, did we not know when we asked for this contract that we were going to have to purchase new equipment? And it's related to a question I asked at the last meeting. At almost every, and again, I get it, that it's some combination of my memory and understanding. I feel like we approve an IT contract, and they're starting to look the same to me. Like, didn't we just pay for computers? And so we asked for, at some point, a schematic for how this all fits together, and I feel like until I can see that, I'm having a hard time figuring out how all these different contracts and purchases relate to each other. I believe us that we're not paying for the same thing again, but I feel like we just approved a contract for computers, and now we're doubling the size of an original contract because of new computer purchases and or hardware. So I'm just having a hard time making the increase add up, and for what we're paying for make sense.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
it does. And good morning, Commissioners.
I'm sorry, I could have started with that, sorry.
First of all, to your initial point, I'm scheduled to come to the board in January for a high level to show you that map so that you can see how these pieces fit together. The initial request for it's in devices, which fits into my classrooms and the access point. These devices here is for the data center. And you are right on point. Yes, absolutely correct. When we had a power failure, we did not project those. And I'm sorry, I couldn't anticipate that those devices was going to fail. But this hardware, this purchase here is for our enterprise ERP system, which again, we just identified as part. It was part of that. It was not, because now that we realize that the iOS on it was damaged, but The initial was for in-devices. Yes, you saw multiple, one in-devices which we renewed for our schools, which is and I might be using lack of better words, based on the needs of the schools. We really do, we use it, but we do not use it as much. But this equipment is for our data center, for the core enterprise, for the applications that derive right enterprise-wide.
So we didn't know about this. So are you saying that this $600,000 increase is also related to the power failure?
No, it is, it is not, because of the device, every year at the end of the year, the money that I would have used for this, I used up in the 300,000. So yes, we didn't, it's replacing that equipment for the initial purchase. Without the power failure, I would have had enough funds to purchase this equipment.
Within the original
Within
337?
Yes, ma'am, within the original 300,000.
So that power failure ended up costing us $900,000 additional dollars.
It did, and because of insurance, we got, and I don't want to quote, I need to go look, the insurance paid us for the majority of that back. We got those funds back.
That would be very helpful to include that
Yes,
kind
ma'am.
of thing in
We
the
got
write-up.
those
'Cause this-
funds.
Without that sentence,
Mhm.
this just looks like
Yes.
$900,000 just
understand.
like materializes, and
Right.
we know that's,
Yeah.
that we know
I
that
don't,
can't happen.
and Armstrong wasn't here, but we got most of the funds back from the power failure. We put it back in
Okay.
general funds.
Okay.
But it ate up my ability to spend, my board-approved spend,
Got
if
it.
I'm making sense what I'm saying. Yes, ma'am.
That's very helpful. I think that in just that conversational type
Mhm.
language, putting that kind of thing in a write-up would help.
Yes,
I just think it really is for the
To paint the whole
layman,
picture.
of which we are.
Yes.
It's helpful, because other than that, it just starts to feel, this could just be me, but it just feels like it's confusing. That's all.
Got it. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Bondima?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Kashani. And when I was looking at it, I don't know why, because I had a lot of questions about it. One thing that I'm really concerned, when I read all of these procurements, I think that everything you're saying is, I understand when you're saying it, but when you're talking about this amount of money, it needs to be itemized much better, because when you're giving us this information, it's going like blah, 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 because I'm not clear about all of this equipment and everything, and it just seems, when you throw the numbers out, I think it would be better before it's approved to itemize and break it down. And you just talked about the insurance being paid back. We get money back from the insurance company. We need to see that, because here we are public and not knowing, and I don't know. And you want us to prove a whole lot of money, and we can't just say yes, 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 which we probably will agree with you, but with this one paragraph, it's not enough information to show us what you're doing. And I'm clear about it, but it's not, it should be itemized, and I don't know if that's your process, the way we put things down, but I think that because we're laymen, and you're experts over there, so I think it's critical that we see the breakdown.
Yeah.
And then it would be clear, we wouldn't even have to go through all of this.
Yes, ma'am.
You understand what I'm
I
saying?
totally understand.
Because most of us, unless we are in the system and knowing about the equipment that you're talking about, I have no idea why $600,000 was added on after we approved $300,000. To me, that's a whole lot of money to say yes, yes. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, at some point, could you do that?
And I am slated to, yes, for your first point, the reimbursements we got from the insurance company,
Right.
I can share that with you, absolutely.
I would include it because this has to go to the board when this, between.
So redo this to put it in there?
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am, I
Because
can do
just
that.
that sentence, if the itemization is easy to do before the board vote next
Mm-hmm.
week, include that. If not, you can send it as additional information.
I can update this board level
But I
and
would
make it in.
update this definitely to include
Everything
that.
exactly, everything that you have said makes sense. But when I walk out the door, I'm still saying in my mind, $600,000 is a tremendous increase from August.
Mhm.
You know, and we've already approved 300. But once you break it down, it's clear. And it just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense for board members to approve something that we're not clear on.
And we'd like to, in good faith,
Right.
say to the rest of the board that the Operations Committee has looked at this, and, we have this
Mm-hmm. I
confidence.
can,
So more, not less.
I can absolutely
More
do
not-
that. I can bake in the reimbursement from the insurance company. I will also bake in, this is unanticipated because, yes, no, I didn't, and if we wouldn't have had that experience, no, I wouldn't be sitting here. We would have had the money.
But the insurance company is not everything. You spoke about equipment that you had, that was not on the original plan.
Absolutely.
And my question immediately is when they come in, do they not know that we need equipment? I mean, this is information that should be outlined, that there's a strong possibility that you're gonna have to replace this and replace that. If that should happen, this is the amount of money that we're gonna need. When you're looking at that type of budget, you, as experts, I'm sure you already know that the equipment that we have now is one thing that's gonna cost this amount of money, but however, later on, if this doesn't work, or this whatever pound shortage or whatever, we're gonna need $600,000 more to do this. We have to think in advance,
Yes, ma'am.
and then I think the board will understand it better when we lay it out, itemize it.
Commissioner Frank?
Thank you. I have a related question from a different perspective, and I'm still confused by this, and this may be something that Allison can help with. When we have these increases, whether it's for the contract we just discussed or some of these others, let's use the contract we discussed. Where is the money in the fiscal year budget that we're currently in? How is it that we're able to come up with $600,000 as an increase in existing contract? How does that work in the board-approved budget?
Well, I mean, in this case, as Chief Thompson indicated, we're getting a reimbursement from insurance, so that's going to pay that. So that's revenue that we didn't account for in the budget that now we're going to have an expense.
Right, so that makes it even more important to put that fact in the write-up, because it's a source of funds that we wouldn't have known about. But the other ones as well, many of them are increases in funding. So where does the money come from?
So, I mean, it depends on the specific situation. So sometimes it's a situation where it may be that they're reallocating money from another budget, that something else they underspent on, so they're over, that yeah, that could be the case in the capital.
I think it would be helpful to, if it isn't too complicated, because I think we discussed this before, because we do have responsibility over the budget, and it would be useful to know how these things are funded. If they're coming from a reallocation, if they're coming from contingencies, they're coming from capital. Is that information you would know when these things are processed? Would you know it at the point of having these write-ups, where the source is for an increase for a new contract?
If I may. So we have a committee that reviews all these procurements before they come before the board, and finance sits on that committee. So in this board letter, you'll see that there's a reference to Mr. Thompson's IT account string. So we would be looking at that account string specifically to see whether or not the $252,000 that's listed in the first bullet is there. That's how we do these confirmations, is that finance sits with us as part of the evaluation.
So in the account string, I mean, it somewhat depends on, the budget gets into a certain level of detail. It may not get into all the detail. So the budget string is often the contracting string. And there are certain initiatives, larger initiatives that we identify often in the budget document that say things that we're doing. But some smaller items, you might replace one item with another, or, the departments generally identify an amount that's contracting, often based on historical. It's usually based on historical amounts of spending, or as well as priorities for that given year. So generally, the question is it fitting within what our plans were for that year? So it's, like I said, on a bigger item, it might have been in the budget, but generally, probably what you approved was a contract line item. So that's why the process that Jeff is describing about how to make sure that it fits within the budget that's what you approved, is the budget.
So let's take this one as an example. I'm looking at that, the contract type, multiple awards, contract term, the guts, the gory details on the numbers. Contract increase, yes, $600,000. Vendors and amount, then that's all seems clear. Funding source, 3001.18.00.0201.2330.0811.0339.
Why didn't you say that? That would have answered the question.
I'm not sure how long a person would have to be on the board to have any earthly idea what that means. Okay, I'll raise my hand. 4.5 years, have no earthly idea what that means. All right? So, you do, and your committee does. So one could ask, so funding source, that can be the technical answer. You could put then semicolon, capital funds.
Got it.
Then there could be a line, or insurance reimbursement, or like an English, something in English,
In
not
English.
numbers,
Got it.
right? Then there could be a line added in there. I'm not sure if this is like some form of legal document that would take like an act of Congress to change, but we're the board, so maybe we could change it. Between the funding source and the solicitation process, you could have something that you could, I'm not telling you how to do it, because I don't know. But you could say, approved budget impact. None, because this is going to be reimbursed by insurance. Or there's a trade-off. We had to do this because it was an emergency, so therefore, there may be some repairs that come up that'll have to be deferred a year. I'm just thinking of something that'll let us know, because every board member that comes in the board asks this question, including the longer-term board members. We just can't tell after we approve the budget, when you ask for an increase, which you're very articulate about why we need it, but we know we don't have a lot of money, so it's hard to understand. So something in plain English that says, therefore what? If we do this, does something else have to change? Should we be alerted to the fact that as a result of doing something that was an emergency, that we're going to believe the experts, as Commissioner Bondima said, what trade-off have we had to make? In some cases, it's not going to be one. In other cases, there is one. In some cases, it'll be, we don't know yet, but we had to do this. We're fine with whatever the answer is, but if somebody asked us this on the street, said, hey, I watched this on TV, and I looked at this online, I'm like, dude, what is a 3.00? I'd be like, I don't know. And that's not a good thing for a board member not to know, especially when they are watching us, watching you, watch the money. And we actually trust you, but we really need to answer those questions in plain English, because we are not the experts. Does that help?
You just repeated everything that I wanted to say, because we are, and Allison, you made a point that we asked, where are you getting the money, and you said different, you weren't clear about it, you said different places or something like that.
You would have approved like a contract line. So within the contract line, there's a lot of different things that could be in there.
Right.
So if one contract goes up, another one may be going down, but what you approved is a contract line. You didn't approve
So
each
what we
individual
need to
contract
know,
within
and
that.
you just said it eloquently, what we need to know is when we're approving this, and you said it already, where is it coming from? Clearly, not one place here, place there. Where is it coming from? Because the bottom line, and I want to be clear about this publicly, when we see people on the street or anywhere, they ask questions, and it's most embarrassing to say, I'll have to get back with you, I don't know. We need to be knowledgeable about something, even though we don't have complete details. We need to be able to answer some questions. And I don't like to be caught off guard when somebody's looking and saying, when we talk about budget issues, and what is shortage of this and shortage of that, and we can't explain, and we are the bottom line to approve all of that. So you
Yes, ma'am.
understand that?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, thank you.
We're not trying to have a make-work situation here, because, so hear us straight. When we ask the question, in each case, you had a very straightforward answer. That's all we're looking for.
Got it. And I
We're
will
not looking for you to go back and like unopen all the contracts and analyze each, no. We just need to know actually what happened
Update the
and
state.
what the trade-offs are, given that we approved
Yes, ma'am.
this increase.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one final question, and not on this. We're going to let this one go. Can you remind, it was so great to see a request for the Erie International for project management over the Hollibird, Raceland Park, O'Donnell Heights. That just sort of signifies yet another step forward to getting closer to actually building something there. I know that this is this project is the one that we keep kind of getting in that weird situation with the IAC where we get money, but we don't get enough. We got to go back. We get a little bit more. We got to go back. Isn't some of this money coming from for the net zero school?
So it does have a grant for net zero, but the bulk of the funding is coming from the CIP.
So it's combining it. So we get the grant, and we've got the grant. We've got a commitment for the grant from out of the Exelon merger from the Public Service Commission. But the thing that's held us back is the
The CIP allocation.
piecemeal allocation from the CFP. I just wanted to be reminded of that.
Yes, yes, so the CIP has been piecemeal. It has a request in this year, and then there'll be one more for next year. We do have a grant, and then there's the local match as well from the city, so it's all three funding sources to
But
fund
we
the
have
projects.
enough to at least get somebody
We
on
have
board to
enough-
start.
Yes, yes, we do.
That's all.
Yep.
I just wanted to be reminded of the different streams.
Yep.
All right, we're not trying to be annoying. Seriously.
No, these are all good questions about how to display information so that's clear and that there's accountability too.
Any other questions for the good of the whole? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job. Boy, I can't wait for the visit to anything about putting a shovel in the ground on Holabird or Graceland O'Donnell Heights.
Oh, believe me, I'm thrilled too, so looking forward to that.
Turned.
At 11:38 a.m.
That's for you, Tanisha. All right, everybody.
Thanks.
What